So I wanted to do a bit of a longer video that kind of looked a bit more at Nigel Farage and why he might not be the guy you think he is, or if he is the guy you think he is, why he might not be the right person to carry out the wishes of a certain section of the British public. Nigel's been involved in politics for a very long time. He's been an MEP since 1999 all the way through to 2020 when we left the European Union. He was elected to be the UKIP leader in 2006, and in 2014 they won the most seats in the UK, and obviously that set the basis then for the pressure to have the referendum on Brexit. And then after that he resigned as the leader. He co-formed the Brexit Party, which then was renamed the Reform Party. That was in 2021. This was mostly due to a reaction about the lack of real Brexit. Obviously, the whole deal was not a very good deal, wasn't advantageous to us at all. So the Brexit Party was formed, and then that was Reform. And so obviously he came back into being the Reform leader in 2024. He just kind of parachuted in and assumed leadership. Obviously, that party was, at the time, fronted by Richard Tice and Ben Habib, and obviously it's gone from strength to strength. So that's a quick potted history of his political career. All of this is very well known. Now, so when it comes to his personal life, his father was a stockbroker. Nigel Farage gained a good education, and eventually he followed in his father's footsteps and worked as a trader, trading commodities at the London Metal Exchange. And then he joined a brokerage, and he was a member of the Conservative Party for quite a long time. He voted for the Green Party at the back end of the 80s, mostly because he thought the policies were sensible and because they were very Eurosceptic. There was a big divide, if I remember rightly at the time, in the Conservative government. You had some very pro-European people, and you had a tranche of very anti kind of European people. Then, so back into the early 90s, he was a founding member of the UKIP party. In 1994, he spoke to Enoch Powell, yes, that Enoch Powell, to endorse UKIP, and Enoch Powell declined, which is an interesting footnote in history. So obviously he spent a lot of his political career in the European Parliament, and he was great. I mean, I've watched several clips of him absolutely hammering people in the European Parliament. So obviously he's come from a very well-off background. He's taken quite an interesting route. I think it's a route that certainly quite a few people have taken, to come from that rich background, then to go into politics. He has had an interesting ride of it. He's been involved in a couple of controversies in the European Parliament, and he was always a thorn in the side of people there, and for the most part did pretty good work. Now, he was actually elected to be leader of UKIP, so he was the democratically elected leader of that party, which is a little bit different to the current situation. He did resign as leader of UKIP to then try to pursue being an MP, of which he has done several times. And just quickly, so his actual record is as follows: 1994 Eastleigh, UKIP wasn't elected. 1997 general election Salisbury, UKIP not elected. 2001 general election Bexhill and Battle, UKIP not elected. 2005 general election South Thanet, UKIP not elected. 2006 by-election Bromley and Chislehurst, UKIP not elected. 2010 general election Buckingham, UKIP not elected. 2015 general election South Thanet, UKIP, where he polled one of his best numbers, not elected. And then eventually he was elected in the 2024 election with Reform to Clacton. So that was his record. The 8th attempt, he was an MP. 30 years, 8 attempts. Maybe that says something about the person or about their politics, who knows. The political landscape was a little bit different back then, so there is that. Obviously his European Parliament UKIP standings are much better. He was elected 5 times with UKIP, and then also 4 times with UKIP. The first one he wasn't elected, And then the last time with the Brexit Party, again, he was elected. He was also elected in both the 2006 and 2007 leadership election for UKIP. He narrowly missed out on winning the general election to South Thanet. He actually came second to a Conservative and was less than 3,000 votes behind. So it was a fairly close contest that he lost there. He beat the Conservative in the 24 election in Clacton by a margin of almost 9,000 votes. So that was quite a big majority that he got there. So he did well. Much of Nigel's political career has been based on the fact that he does not want a federal state of Europe like most Eurosceptic people. I think that his switch from Conservative via Greens to then forming his own party is a result of that, and that kind of bears itself out. As I said, there were quite a lot of Eurosceptic MPs in the Tory party, but also there were quite a few people who were very, very into the idea of Europe. But he just decided, I think, to kind of go his own way, which is absolutely fine, and more power to him for setting up an organisation to do that. Obviously, this isn't like a character assassination of the man. You have to give him credit where credit's due. And for being one of the leading voices in Brexit, and we can argue about how badly it was done, how well it was done, etc., etc. I think most people feel that at least that part of it was done. And yes, Brexit in name only perhaps, but we do actually have to give credit to Nigel Farage for that. So Nigel Farage has fallen out with quite a few people. I'm not going to go through every single example. There are numerous examples, especially when you move around from party to party like he has done. But just to kind of go through a couple. For example, in UKIP, when a guy came in, Mark Reckless, he transitioned from Tories to UKIP. He was saying that the UK might have to, in their transitional period, get rid of some migrants if the UK voted for Brexit. But Farage swiftly said that wasn't the policy, and that anyone that came to Britain legally was entitled to stay. And then he kind of clashed with the guy because he thought it was a bit of a U-turn on what they thought the policy was. So not something of nothing really. There was another defector, Douglas Carswell. This one was a little bit more of a thing because he accused Carswell of blocking him to go into the House of Lords, which is interesting. I'm not sure why he would want to do that. Carswell denied it. He called Carswell a Tory posh party boy who should be expelled from UKIP. And he said that he tried to undermine everything we've stood for a very long time. So you can see that some of the language he's used there is relevant to what is actually happening now. In 2015, UKIP's most senior woman, the deputy chairman, Suzanne Evans, said that Farage was seen as very divisive, and she argued that somebody else should front the Brexit campaign. So that was interesting. She was subsequently dropped as party spokesperson, and officials were told to have no contact with her. And he didn't back her leadership bid after that, so they had a falling out. You had a guy, Patrick O'Flynn, he went from journalism to politics. He became an MEP for UKIP in 2014, and he labelled Farage as snarling, thin-skinned and aggressive, and then he stood down as the economic spokesperson. You've had other people, various people in UKIP who've clashed with him, and then eventually obviously he did quit, and he accused the leader, at that point was Gerard Batten, of turning it into an outfit for street activism and of having an obsession with Tommy Robinson and Islam. So he was trying to get away from those kind of more very right-wing views, I guess. He's had a clash with his own Brexit party MEPs. 4 MEPs resigned back in 2019, and they just basically didn't like the election strategy. So you get these squabbles. Then you've got the whole thing with Ben Habib. He was sacked as the co-deputy leader on the basis that he wasn't elected, surely there could have been a place for him. And I think this is just an ideological falling out. And then obviously you've got the Rupert Lowe situation, which we've gone through. Everybody knows about that situation, and that just seems to be a bit more of a power play. But there's lots of examples in his history where he's clashed with different people, and you are going to get that. I mean, politics is a rough game, but I think that a lot of people are saying that Nigel Farage wants to be the guy. He wants to be the only person whichever either party or outfit that he basically leads or stands for. He talks about being a team player, but everybody is saying it's him that's not the team player, which is an issue. It's a bit of a problem. You have to have leadership for sure, but you also need to recognise that you are with a party. You're essentially with a team. And it sounds as much about ego as anything. It's interesting that he chooses to use routes like appearing on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. Allegedly, he has said to people that he deserves money at this point. He's had a long run and he deserves to cash in and get money. Well, he certainly would have done that with things like the I'm a Celebrity thing. Obviously, he gets probably paid quite well for being a presenter on GB News, and he must have made quite a bit of money in his days as being a trader. So is he in it just for the money and his own status, his own celebrity? This is the accusation that's being levelled. Yes, he's got a ton of charisma, apparently. I mean, personally, I don't see it. I see him as a person who has been on the political scene for a long time, so politically very savvy, speaks very well, is fairly knowledgeable and can make a statement, and also deflect and put things, kind of put people down if they're trying to attack him, steer the conversation. He's a typical politician. He's great at the slipperiness, the greasy slip and slide. But the big question that's come to the forefront is the actual politics of it, because for a long time he has been the face of Brexit, and it's the other policies now that are just as important. The question on immigration, the question on Islam, and this is where people feel that he's really dropped the ball in terms of reform supporters, because don't forget, although reform kind of came from the ashes of the Brexit party, and it may well have snagged some people from kind of the dying parts of maybe UKIP, etc., etc., the politics are a little bit different. And it's great to focus on the just one thing. And obviously Brexit was just one thing. When you have a party that has to have policies to govern, that's a whole different thing. Especially as one of the top three things that concern British people the most is the immigration situation. There are some people who are in the base of reform who have some very, very strong ideas about that. Now, he went on to the Winston Marshall podcast. Winston Marshall being the I believe, banjo player, I think, from Mumford & Sons, who left Mumford & Sons because he got into a bit of trouble for having some conservative views, long story short. It would be a better idea if I play this clip so that you get some context and some background.
The nuanced argument is that there is a growing number of young Muslim males who loathe who we are. Loathe. But the vast majority live peacefully, even if their sympathies may lie in a slightly different direction. And we all have sympathies in terms of our own tribe, our own family, when at times it may not be rational. Am I concerned about the Hamas stuff? Of course I am. But the nub of it is, we have a Muslim population in Britain growing by about 75% every 10 years. Right? That's just where we are.
Mm-hmm.
If we politically alienate the whole of Islam, we will lose. We'll lose.
So how does one include
We
them?
will lose. By 2050, goodness knows what kind of a terrible state we're going to be in.
So essentially what he's saying is that we cannot really say anything too strong or too strident for fear of upsetting Muslims. That's essentially what he is saying. He is saying that if we go against Muslims, we'll lose, which I don't understand the rationale and logic. It's a bit of a defeatist attitude. And the base of reform, or the potential people that might vote for reform, that's not what they want to hear. Islamophobia is a ridiculous term. We all know it. There's no such thing as Islamophobia, but people are genuinely concerned and have a right to be about people coming into the country that are going to carry out atrocities, or they're going to have to be careful because of YouTube, obviously. They are going to do things to people, very nasty, nasty things, and we all know what I'm talking about, en masse, for example, in places like Rotherham. People don't want that. People don't want the idea of people importing an ideology that leads them to believe that they can carry out these acts against other people. It just doesn't sit right. So people have a legitimate concern. What Farage is saying is it maybe because there are so many people here that we would lose, that they would outvote us? It's kind of slightly baffling. And as I said, it's not really what reform people want to hear. They want to hear strong words. This is why in this recent war of words with Rupert Lowe, a lot of people have sided with Rupert Lowe. He's being strong on that. They would rather hear what Rupert Lowe has to say. They've kind of looked at what Nigel Farage has said and kind of thought, well, hold on a second. This isn't the kind of thing that we signed up for. Now, obviously, with the Rupert Lowe situation, a lot of things have come out in the wash. Lots of things have been said, but the devil's in the detail, as always. It is an ideological split. Nigel Farage has come back and said there's no way back for Rupert Lowe. What seems to be the issue is the use of language, because Farage is trying to come more into the centre. He is trying to appeal to the moderates and a broad range of people. Rupert Lowe has said that people from the party tried to censor and water down what he was saying at one of their, I think it was a conference of theirs. So it is to do with Farage trying to toe a political line that maybe reform members and supporters do not want. So the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, which is a great podcast, I watch it regularly. If you don't see it, you should check it out. They did a great piece on this. I'd encourage you to look at it. So we'll play a little bit of it now.
Nigel Farage admits that he did silence Rupert Lowe and says, right, even no matter what happens now, he'll never be allowed back into reform. So, okay, brilliant. You've lost your brightest star. And a person
one good MP gone.
Yeah, exactly.
Who next, Nigel?
The guy who was doing something like 56% of all the work, the guy who was actually actively fundraising to help his constituents. He said obviously there'd be no way back for him. And Nigel Farage says in his speech in Essex that he talks about, what I stopped him from using was the word repatriation. I told him not to use the word repatriation as well as mass deportations. So you did silence him on that. You were just saying... He says, you silenced me on this, and you say, I silenced you on that.
His exact words were, I thought it was a very grave, dark, and dangerous use of language. Right, correct. So what Farage is saying there...
School mom, tone policing.
Categorically, one, it's very feminine to be governed by external perceptions. Rupert Lowe doesn't do that. Secondly, Farage is explicitly saying the two-tier justice system that he was rallying against in the aftermath of Southport will remain in place for illegal immigrants. Because now, if you are refusing to deport every single illegal immigrant in this country, that means you are comfortable with a level of law breaking.
Yes.
And so Reform's party platform, much to our dismay, is we will allow illegal immigrants to stay in the country because we don't want to be called racist.
Yeah.
So that's what those guys think, and I agree. He is clearly sidelining a lot of the views of Reform people. And sadly, Matt Goodwin sort of jumped to his defence, and I've got a lot of time for Matt Goodwin, and I think he is somebody that I'm not sure what capacity he's with Reform. I don't know how recent that's been. He's on GB News. He is a professor, very smart, very sharp guy, great at getting things across, but he decided to kind of wade into this on X as well to defend Nigel. And unfortunately, I think he's a little bit wrong on this. And I think that Connor Tomlinson sort of took him to task a little bit. So I want to just kind of listen to what's said here.
Goodwin, came out in defence of Nigel Farage on this. And I hate this now because unfortunately, like, you're going to have to pick a side. You're either with the person leading from the front and telling the truth, or you're with the person who leads from the rear and is telling lies.
Look, I really like Matt. I've had him on my show twice.
Yeah, I've had Matt on the show.
Matt, Matt was one of the two people in Reform that's basically keeping my faith in there alongside Rupert.
Yep.
I think he's not only picked the wrong side here, but if Farage and Zia Yousef are not below these tactics, Matt, do you not think they won't come for you next? Because you are the most eligible successor to Farage currently in the party. Yep. And if there's one thing they can't abide, especially Zia Yousef, it's people getting in his way.
I mean, everyone around Farage must understand they are a marked man. Like, he's got such a long history. We covered it in the podcast earlier in the week, of his long history of throwing people under the bus and destroying them to the best of his ability, which is what he's just tried with Rupert Lowe. You're not safe with him, Matt. Matt had this contradictory, an argument with Rupert Lowe, because Rupert Lowe pointed out, well, no, they did censor him on the term mass deportations. And so Matt said, well, in reality, it's an unworkable, unpopular, and impossible policy. I don't think that's true, Matt. And I know because, like Connor, I read your Substack. Connor, you replied to this. Do you want to just explain your reply very quickly?
Yeah, so Matt was alleging that Rupert Lowe had called for the deporting of British nationals, which is not true. He's never said that ever. And in fact,
I think that might be in reference to his statement that we need to deport the communities that hid the crime.
he said foreign nationals.
Yeah.
Explicitly, he said foreign nationals and dual nationals.
Yeah, so I'm kind of not really sure on what Matt Goodwin's thinking there about that. That's a bit of an odd one. But there you've got an overall picture of what the sort of the political direction that they're trying to take reform in. They're rowing back on very strong kind of things that might have been said. I mean, Nigel Farage was very sort of firm with things like the Southport riots, but since that's happened, then it's kind of been crickets. I've not really heard a great deal. So it seems clear where the direction of travel is. He's trying to be more moderate. Now, how much of this is down to this chairman, this Zia, this Mohammed Yousef? I don't know why he's trying to hide the fact his name is Mohammed. So just a quick one on Mohammed Zia Yousef. So basically, his parents migrated from Sri Lanka. He was educated at a fee charging school in London. He won a 50% scholarship. He's got a BSc in international relations, also from the London School of Economics, bit of a lefty place. And then he worked at Merrill Lynch and Goldman Sachs after leaving university. And he founded a luxury concierge company, and then he sold it. And he sold it for a couple $100 million, and he made £31 million off that. And that was in 2023. So obviously he's become a donor, but it's almost like he's bought into the party that way. So then because he's obviously put up quite a lot of money, they've made him chairman. And it's interesting because he himself, in his own words, describes himself as a British Muslim patriot. Now, I'm not saying you can't be a British Muslim patriot. There are definitely Muslims who have integrated and come over here, but it seems to me that he's slightly kind of got a left-wing background, but he has been a paid-up member of the Conservative Party. Now, in the Conservative Party, as a lot of people have said, like Liz Truss has come out and said it, there were liberal conservatives who are possibly more aligned with liberal Democrats. There is a blur there for sure. I mean, we've seen it with the left-leaning way that the Conservative Party has gone. This guy has gone in last year, and again, very smooth talking, talks the talk. Obviously, they're trying to professionalise the party, and in doing so, they believe that they need to move more to the centre. But it's interesting because the reason they're polling in the 20% is mostly because it's awakened a dormant British sense of anticipation of there being a third party to break the two-party monopoly. So I'm not entirely sure how this switch to more centrist politics will play out. And going back to Nigel Farage, had he gotten into the Tory party and potentially worked from the inside, could he have swayed them to have gone the route that he wanted everybody else and going via the UKIP party? Would he have had more influence that way? It's just really interesting. So you don't have to have all of the politics of a certain party. We get that. But with this Rupert Lowe business, it's just thrown up a whole bunch of stuff in the past that maybe wasn't sort of mainstream. And again, you've got the social media age that we didn't have back 20 years ago so much. And so, or even 15, 10 years ago, it's become much more prevalent. People have access to the information. And people are really finding a lot out about his character. And it seems that every time he's faced with a challenge from someone, he'll shut them down. And on a couple of occasions, it will kind of turn slightly nasty. And he'll seek to try to either blacken their name, destroy their reputation, or in some way kind of point to something that isn't necessarily what they're doing. So I don't know, I've never really been sold on him. I thought that he did a good thing with Brexit, despite the obvious problems with Brexit. But is he really the person that we want to have in charge of reform? He can't be gotten rid of, as I've said. That from their own sort of manual, the members' manual, doesn't look like it's possible. So where does reform go? What do they do? I think that most people will still stick with reform because, again, it's that horrible position of they are, as far as parties on the right are concerned, they are the top dog. Nobody really wants to go back to conservatism. I mean, conservatism, yes, but not the Conservative Party. So again, if it's a straight up choice between Labour and Reform, even people that might not be able to get fully behind Farage will probably still vote Reform. And it is a shame. I feel that Ben Habib has been vindicated in what he's been saying, although, again, maybe he didn't need to be so bitter and so outspoken about it. I just feel that at the time when we need it most, what we've got is a bit of a narcissistic, thin-skinned leader of a party, and it seems that potentially we might not be able to do any better